Today, we dive into a more personal question. What did people in ancient times use to wipe after using the bathroom? Let's start by looking abroad at other ancient societies before focusing on China and tracing the evolution of wiping tools from antiquity to the modern era. Across the ancient world, different cultures developed unique solutions for post-toilet hygiene, often dictated by available resources and local customs. In the Roman Empire, for instance, public latrines were a marvel of engineering, complete with running water and communal seating. The Romans used a tool called a spongia, a sponge attached to the end of a stick. They would wet the sponge, wipe themselves, and then rinse it in a channel of flowing water or a basin filled with salty brine. The salt water served as a natural disinfectant, which was a surprisingly advanced approach for the time. However, these sponges were shared among users in public facilities, raising concerns about hygiene by today's standards. Cross-contamination and the spread of infections were likely risks, though the Romans, unaware of germ theory, seemed unperturbed. Elsewhere, in ancient Greece and parts of the Mediterranean, people often used small, smooth pebbles or broken pieces of ceramic called pessoi. These ceramic shards, typically smooth to avoid sharp edges, were recycled from broken pottery. Archaeologists have even found pessoi inscribed with humorous phrases or the names of unpopular figures, suggesting that wiping could be an act of satire. While effective for scraping, stones and ceramics were far less comfortable than modern options and could cause abrasions if not carefully selected. Turning to China, the wiping habits of ancient people were shaped by both material availability and cultural attitudes. Today, toilet paper is ubiquitous, but its widespread use is a relatively recent development. Papermaking, perfected by Kai Luan in the Eastern Han Dynasty, around 105 CE, revolutionized writing and record-keeping. However, paper was initially considered too valuable for mundane tasks like wiping. For centuries after its invention, paper remained a luxury reserved for calligraphy, books, and official documents. The idea of using it for personal hygiene didn't gain traction until much later. It wasn't until the Yuan dynasty, 1271 to 1368, under Mongol rule, that paper began to be commonly used for wiping in China. The Mongols, less attached to the Chinese reverence for paper as a cultural artifact, helped normalize its use in the bathroom. Historical records suggest that even the imperial court had supplies of coarse paper designated for this purpose. However, the paper of that era was rough and stiff compared to modern toilet tissue. Users often had to soften it by crumpling and rubbing it before use to avoid discomfort or injury. During the Ming and Qing dynasties, 1368 to 1912, the use of paper for wiping became more widespread, even among commoners. Specialized toilet paper appeared in markets, made from cheaper materials like recycled scraps or bamboo fibers. Wealthier households might opt for scented or decorated paper, turning a practical act into a small luxury. Still, paper remained a costly resource for many, and its use for wiping was not universal across all social classes. So, what did the Chinese use before paper became a wiping tool? The answer lies in a simple but effective device known as the sechu, or toilet stick. These were thin, flat strips of wood or bamboo, typically 20 to 30 centimeters long, used to scrape clean after defecation. Think of it as a rudimentary spatula, with a technique not unlike scooping soft food. The earliest written references to sechu date back to the Three Kingdoms period, 220 to 280 CE, though their use likely predates these records. Scholars believe the sechu may have been introduced to China from India during the Eastern Han Dynasty, alongside Buddhist monastic practices that emphasized ritual cleanliness. The tool also spread to Japan, where archaeologists have unearthed well-preserved examples from Nara period, 710 to 794 CE sites. In China, sechu were typically made from readily available materials like bamboo, which was abundant and easy to shape. While most were plain, some elite households used intricately carved versions, occasionally inscribed with auspicious symbols, elevating the humble stick to a status symbol. Despite their practicality, sechu had obvious hygienic drawbacks. If not properly cleaned, or if shared among family members, they could harbor bacteria. Their hard surfaces also made thorough cleaning challenging, likely contributing to health issues like infections or hemorrhoids. though such conditions were rarely documented in ancient texts. Before the Sechu, evidence of wiping practices is scarce, as ancient texts seldom discussed such intimate matters. However, we can make educated guesses based on ethnographic studies and practices in later rural communities. In resource-scarce areas, people likely turned to natural materials, broad leaves, grass stalks, corn cobs, smooth stones, or even clumps of dry soil. Leaves, especially from soft, broadleaf plants, were a common choice in forested regions, though they carried risks of irritation or parasitic contamination. Stones, while durable, were harsh on the skin and required careful selection to avoid injury. In rural China, even as late as the early 20th century, some communities relied on these natural materials due to poverty or lack of access to paper. Such practices suggest that, prior to the Han Dynasty, similar methods were widespread. The discomfort and potential health risks of these crude tools likely made ailments like hemorrhoids a common affliction in antiquity. The soft, disposable toilet paper we take for granted today is a product of the early 20th century, and its invention was born out of a fortunate accident. In the 1900s, the Scott Paper Company in the United States faced a dilemma when a shipment of paper arrived damaged, wrinkled by moisture and unfit for its intended use in printing or packaging. Rather than discard the stock, company founder Arthur Scott saw an opportunity. He perforated the paper into small, tearable sheets and marketed it as Sani tissue, a hygienic alternative for wiping. The product was pitched to public venues like train stations, hotels, and schools, where it quickly gained popularity for its convenience and softness. By the 1920s, Sani tissue and similar products had transformed bathroom habits across America and soon spread globally. Advances in manufacturing made toilet paper softer, stronger, and more affordable, with innovations like multi-ply tissue and embossed textures enhancing user comfort. What began as a salvage operation became a cornerstone of modern hygiene. The evolution of wiping tools, from Roman sponges and Chinese toilet sticks to mass-produced toilet paper, mirrors broader advances in technology, sanitation, and cultural priorities. Each method, whether a bamboo strip or a perfumed sheet, reflects the constraints and creativity of its time. While we might chuckle at the thought of scraping with a stick, ancient people made do with what they had, often with remarkable ingenuity. Today, toilet paper is a global standard, yet in some remote or underdeveloped regions, leaves, stones, or other traditional materials remain in use. The next time you reach for a roll of toilet paper, spare a thought for the Sechu and the long, winding path that brought us to this small but significant comfort.